August 7th, 1944. The morning fog clings thick across the Belgian countryside near Mortain. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Frankland grips his binoculars, scanning the mist-shrouded road ahead. The rumble reaches him first, low, mechanical, growing louder. Then shapes materialize through the grey wall. Panthers. German Mark V Panthers, their sloped armour gleaming wet with condensation, their 75mm guns sweeping left and right as they advance toward his position with the 1st Battalion, 117th Infantry Regiment. Every instinct screams the same doctrine Frankland learned at Fort Benning. Tanks do not fight tanks. That is the job of tank destroyers. Medium tanks exploit breakthroughs. They strike supply lines. They destroy artillery positions. They support infantry. When Panthers appear, you call for help. You pull back. You wait for the M10 Wolverines or the M18 Hellcats to arrive with their specialized anti-tank weapons. But something has changed in the past week since Normandy. Something fundamental. The American tankers and infantry have stopped retreating when German armor appears. They have stopped waiting for the doctrine to save them. What the world would discover in the smoking wreckage of Mortain, Arracourt, and a dozen other forgotten crossroads would rewrite everything military theorists thought they understood about armoured warfare. The numbers tell an impossible story. By war's end, American armour would achieve a 2.75 to 1 kill ratio against German tanks and tank destroyers, not despite their doctrine of avoiding enemy tanks, but because they learned to ignore it. The morning Frankland watches those Panthers emerge from the fog. 700 Americans armed with rifles, machine guns, bazookas, and 4 M5 3-inch anti-tank guns face what should be certain annihilation. The doctrine says this engagement should not happen. The reality is about to prove the doctrine catastrophically wrong. To understand why American tankers started ignoring Panzers, we must first understand the doctrine that told them never to engage. The story begins not on European battlefields, but in staff rooms and war colleges, where generals planned for a conflict they had never fought. The lessons drawn from German success in Poland and France created an American armoured doctrine built on a fundamental assumption. Tanks should never fight other tanks. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The reasoning appeared sound in 1941 when the United States entered World War II. Germany's blitzkrieg tactics demonstrated that concentrated armoured formations could punch through enemy lines and drive deep into rear areas, disrupting command, destroying supplies, and throwing entire armies into chaos. The Wehrmacht combined tanks with mechanized infantry, mobile artillery, and close air support in an integrated system that moved faster than defenders could react. American military planners studied these victories intensely. They concluded that American tanks should adopt similar offensive tactics, exploit breakthroughs, attack rear echelons, avoid frontal engagements with enemy strong points, most critically, avoid tank versus tank battles. Field Manual 17-10, published in early 1942, states explicitly in Section 7, paragraph H, against equal or superior hostile armoured forces, friendly armoured units will avoid frontal assault and manoeuvre to cut off or destroy armoured units' supply facilities, followed by blows against the rear of enemy detachments. Field Manual 17-30, the Armoured Force Field Manual for Tank Platoon, dated October 22, 1942, defines the mission clearly. For tanks in armoured divisions, the mission of tanks in the armoured division is to tanks in the size, attack and destroy vital hostile installations such as command posts, communication centres, supply installations, reserves, and artillery. For separate tank battalions supporting infantry, the mission of tanks in the separate tank battalions is to assist infantry, cavalry, or motorized divisions to advance by destroying hostile machine guns, personnel, and vital installations. Notice what appears nowhere in these mission statements. Destroying enemy tanks. That mission belonged exclusively to a specialized force created specifically for anti-tank warfare, the Tank Destroyer Force. The concept emerged from the shock of witnessing German armored tactics in action. In May 1940, panzer divisions crashed through French defenses, despite France possessing more tanks than Germany, and many technically superior to German models. The problem was not tank quality, but employment. French tanks were scattered among infantry divisions, used primarily for close support. German tanks concentrated in dedicated panzer divisions that massed overwhelming force at chosen breakthrough points. Once through the defensive crust, panzers drove deep, paralyzing French command and control before scattered French armour could concentrate for counterattack. Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, Chief of Army Ground Forces, championed the tank destroyer concept as America's answer to the panzer threat. His vision created mobile, lightly armoured vehicles armed with powerful guns specifically designed to destroy tanks. These battalions would remain in reserve behind the front lines. When enemy armour penetrated, tank destroyers would deploy rapidly to ambush positions, knock out the attackers, and contain the breakthrough while infantry reorganized defenses. Field Manual 18-5, Organization and Tactics of Tank Destroyer Units, published June 16, 1942, states unambiguously, armored forces are primarily organized, trained, and equipped for offensive operations against vital objectives deep in the hostile rear. The manual continues, making the division of labor explicit. American tanks handle offensive exploitation. Tank destroyers handle defensive anti-armor missions. Never shall these roles overlap. The doctrine created an entire branch of the army devoted to killing tanks. At its peak, over 100 tank destroyer battalions trained for rapid deployment against enemy armor. The vehicles evolved from improvised half-tracks mounting French 75mm guns to purpose-built designs like the M10 Wolverine with its 3-inch gun in an open-topped turret on a Sherman chassis. Later came the M18 Hellcat, the fastest tracked vehicle America produced in the war, capable of 60 miles per hour, and finally the M36 Jackson with its powerful 90mm gun. On paper, the system appeared elegant. Medium tanks would exploit breakthroughs using their mobility and reliability. When facing enemy armor, they would maneuver around it, leaving the fighting to specialized tank destroyers positioned to ambush. Combined arms doctrine would integrate tanks with infantry, artillery, and air power in coordinated operations. Each element performed its designated role. The tanks advanced, the tank destroyers protected. Everyone operated within their assigned mission. The war games conducted in Louisiana and the Carolinas in 1941 seemed to validate the concept. Tank destroyer units successfully ambushed and destroyed opposing tank formations under exercise conditions. The aggressive spirit McNair demanded appeared to work. The doctrine entered combat with American forces confident in its soundness. Then, American tanks met German tanks in North Africa. Reality diverged immediately from doctrine. The tank destroyer battalions, rushed to Tunisia in early 1943 with minimal training and improvised equipment, found themselves employed not as mobile reserves, but attached piecemeal to infantry divisions for close support. The M3 gun motor carriage, a French 75mm gun mounted on an M3 half-track, proved woefully inadequate when German tanks appeared. The first major test came at El Guetar on March 23, 1943. Elements of the German 10th Panzer Division attacked American positions held by the 1st Infantry Division. The 601st Tank Destroyer Battalion, equipped with 31 M3 GMCs, deployed just behind the crest of Kedab Ridge. When German tanks rolled down Highway 15, the lightly armoured half-tracks moved forward, fired, then retreated to new positions before German return. Fire could destroy them. The engagement demonstrated both the concept's potential and its limitations. American tank destroyers knocked out multiple German tanks, but suffered heavy losses themselves. The thin armour protection proved fatal when caught by enemy fire. More troubling, the expected. Massive German armoured thrusts never materialised in the concentrated form doctrine predicted. German tanks appeared in company and battalion strength, not in the overwhelming divisional masses that were supposed to trigger tank destroyer deployment. American armour found itself frequently engaging German tanks, despite doctrine explicitly prohibiting such encounters. In Sicily and early Italian campaigns, the employment of American tanks continued evolving away from doctrinal purity. Mountainous terrain channeled movement into narrow valleys, where exploitation maneuvers proved impossible. German tanks, particularly the newer models with long-barreled 75mm guns, could engage American Shermans at ranges where the Shermans' short-barreled 75 could not effectively respond. Tank crews watched their rounds bounce harmlessly off German armour, while enemy fire penetrated Sherman frontal plates with ease. By June 1944, when American armour landed in Normandy, 3 years of combat experience had begun revealing doctrinal flaws, but the doctrine remained official policy. The M4 Sherman medium tank, America's primary armoured vehicle, was designed and produced according to specifications, prioritizing reliability, producibility, and offensive mobility over anti-armour capability. The Sherman's 75mm M3 gun could not penetrate the frontal armour of German Panthers or Tigers at any combat range. Its armour, adequate against earlier German tanks, proved vulnerable to the high-velocity guns equipping Panzers by 1944. American tankers understood these limitations viscerally. They nicknamed their Shermans Ronsons after the cigarette lighter, grimly noting they lit every time when hit. The comparison, while exaggerated by post-war mythology, reflected genuine fear. Early Sherman models stored ammunition in unprotected sponsons on the hull sides. A penetrating hit often ignited propellant charges, causing catastrophic fires that killed crews within seconds. The gasoline-powered engines, while reliable and easy to maintain, burned fiercely when ruptured. The psychological impact on American tank crews facing Panthers and Tigers cannot be overstated. German propaganda emphasized the invincibility of German armor. Captured documents and prisoner interrogations revealed that Panzer crews believed themselves safe behind their sloped frontal armor. A Panther's glacis plate, 80mm thick at 55 degrees, provided effective protection equivalent to 139mm of vertical armor. The turret front measured 100mm. The Panther's KUK-42 L-70 gun could penetrate a Sherman from over 2,000 meters away. Sherman crews knew these numbers. They knew that in a frontal engagement at long range, they were outmatched. The doctrine told them to avoid such engagements, but doctrine cannot control what happens when the shooting starts. In the Norman hedgerows, American armour found itself channeled into narrow lanes, bordered by thick vegetation growing on raised earthen banks. The bocage, as the French called this terrain, transformed every advance into a series of close-range ambushes. German tanks and anti-tank guns, positioned in hull-down positions at field exits, could destroy entire American columns before return fire could be effectively directed. The hedgerow fighting revealed another doctrinal problem. Tank destroyer battalions, supposedly held in reserve for rapid deployment against armoured thrusts, were instead attached to infantry divisions and employed for direct fire support. The open-topped turrets that were supposed to provide excellent visibility for seeking enemy tanks became death traps when German artillery and mortars found their positions. The lack of overhead protection meant a single tree burst could kill an entire crew. By late July 1944, American commanders faced a crisis. Operation Cobra, the breakout from Normandy, required American armour to exploit through German lines and drive into open country. But every advance encountered German tanks that doctrine said American tankers should avoid. Tank destroyer battalions could not be everywhere simultaneously. Infantry needed their supporting Shermans to advance against German strong points. The doctrine's elegant division of labour was collapsing under operational stress. Lieutenant General Omar Bradley, commanding First Army, wrote bluntly to General Dwight Eisenhower in early July, Sherman crews reported that German tanks could engage them at ranges where American return fire proved ineffective. The 76mm gun, supposed to provide improved anti-armor capability, was just beginning to reach frontline units. Initial reports suggested it offered only marginal improvement against Panther frontal armor. Eisenhower's response, documented in multiple sources, captured command-level frustration. "You mean our 76 won't knock these Panthers out? Why, I thought it was going to be the wonder gun of the war." The disconnect between what commanders believed their equipment could do and what combat crews experienced doing it revealed a fundamental problem. American tanks had been designed and produced according to a doctrine that combat was proving wrong. The doctrinal assumption that tanks should avoid fighting other tanks rested on several beliefs. First, that tank versus tank combat would be rare, with tanks spending most of their time engaging infantry, artillery, and soft targets. Second, that specialized tank destroyers could handle the anti-armor mission more effectively than medium tanks. Third, that American numerical superiority and combined arms integration would compensate for technical inferiority in individual tank duels. Combat statistics would eventually prove the first assumption correct. Over 80% of all shots fired by American tanks targeted something other than enemy tanks: infantry, machine gun positions, bunkers, trucks, artillery, buildings. The Sherman's high-explosive round proved excellent for these missions. The 75mm M48HE round produced 950 effective fragments in a 20-foot radius, according to Army Technical Manual 9-1907, but the 20% of shots directed at enemy tanks mattered disproportionately. When Panthers or Tigers appeared, every other tactical consideration became secondary. Infantry could not advance while German tanks commanded the terrain. Artillery could not move forward. Supply columns halted. The entire American combined arms system that was supposed to overwhelm German technical advantages stalled when German armor appeared, and American tanks could not defeat it. The second assumption, that tank destroyers could handle anti-armor missions, proved partially true, but operationally inadequate. Tank destroyer battalions performed well when properly employed. At Le Désert on July 11, 1944, M10 platoons from the 799th and 823rd Tank Destroyer Battalions engaged 3 Panzer battalions of the Panzer Lehr Division in the claustrophobic Norman hedgerows. The M10s knocked out 30 Panther tanks in a series of close-range ambushes, supported by abundant air power. But tank destroyer battalions could not be everywhere. A typical infantry division might have one attached tank destroyer battalion with 36 guns. An armoured division had one tank destroyer battalion supporting 3 tank battalions with over 150 Shermans. When German armour appeared, the odds that a tank destroyer would be in position to engage immediately were low. Sherman crews faced the choice of engaging themselves or retreating, surrendering tactical initiative to an enemy who could be defeated if only American doctrine permitted it. The third assumption, about numerical superiority, compensating for technical inferiority, contained truth, but ignored the human cost. Yes, American industry could replace destroyed Shermans faster than Germany could replace Panthers. Yes, combined arms integration gave American forces advantages in artillery support, air power, and logistics sustainability. But these systemic advantages meant little to the crew of an individual Sherman facing a Panther across an open field. Doctrine that told them to avoid the fight felt less like tactical wisdom and more like abandonment. By early August 1944, American tank crews and infantry had begun ignoring doctrine out of necessity. They engaged German armour because the alternative, retreating or waiting for support that might never arrive, surrendered the initiative and prolonged battles. What commanders would discover over the coming months would transform American armoured doctrine fundamentally. The Battle of Mortain demonstrated this transformation, brutally. Adolf Hitler, desperate to stop the Allied breakout from Normandy, ordered a counterattack designed to cut American supply lines and drive to the coast at Avranches. The German plan concentrated 4 panzer divisions, with over 1,000 tanks and assault guns in a massed thrust, similar to the blitzkrieg attacks that doctrine predicted, and tank destroyers were supposed to counter. The attack launched at midnight on August 7th. SS Panzer troops hit the American 30th Infantry Division east of Mortain, while the 2nd Panzer Division drove toward Avranches from the north. The Germans achieved tactical surprise. Ultra-intelligence had intercepted orders for Operation Lüttich by August 4th, but the information reached First Army headquarters too late to alert frontline troops to the immediate assault. Lieutenant Colonel Franklin's battalion found itself directly in the path of the 1st SS Panzer Division. 700 men with rifles, machine guns, bazookas, and 4 3-inch towed anti-tank guns faced Panthers supported by infantry and assault guns. Doctrine said this force should not engage armour directly. Towed guns lacked mobility to reposition under fire. Infantry bazookas, while effective against side and rear armour, required suicidally close ranges against frontal plates. The proper response, according to doctrine, was to call for tank destroyers and armour support, while withdrawing to defensible positions. The Americans did not withdraw. They fought. The engagement that morning near the crossroads at Saint-Barthélemy became legend among American forces. As Panthers advanced through thick fog, American anti-tank guns engaged at point-blank range. The 1st Panther took a direct hit, penetrating frontal armour and stopping the tank. A German tank retriever approaching the disabled Panther came under fire. Crews from 3 tanks dismounted to discuss options. An American bazooka man, creeping forward through the fog, fired into the côte group, killing some and scattering others. He then engaged 2 of the stationary tanks at close range, disabling both. The pattern repeated across the Mortain sector that morning. Americans engaged German armour at ranges where technical specifications mattered less than tactical positioning and crew courage. 2 anti-tank gun teams knocked out 2 more Panthers, one at only 50 yards. Before firing ended, 2 bazooka teams destroyed 2 additional tanks. Infantry armed with rifles killed exposed German tank commanders. Machine guns suppressed supporting German infantry. The crossroads became a killing ground where American combined arms, employed with desperate aggression, stopped a panzer attack that should have rolled over them. The Germans took the crossroads, but at terrible cost. 13 German tanks destroyed. The Americans lost 11 towed guns they could not withdraw under fire. But the 823rd Tank Destroyer Battalion, equipped with self-propelled guns, rushed forward to support. American forces held Mortain despite Hitler throwing the weight of German armour reserves into the attack. Over 6 days of fighting, American tanks and tank destroyers, supported by infantry, artillery, and eventually massive air support when weather cleared, shattered the German offensive. Of 177 German tanks and assault guns that participated in the attack, 46 were lost. Only 9 fell to air attack, despite Allied fighter bombers claiming over 200 kills. The rest fell to American ground forces, many to Sherman tanks and tank destroyers fighting in close coordination with infantry. What Mortain demonstrated was that American combined arms doctrine, when crews ignored the prohibition against tanks fighting tanks, worked devastatingly well. The Germans had concentrated their armour as doctrine predicted. But instead of specialized tank destroyer battalions racing to intercept, American tanks engaged directly, supported by infantry with bazookas, artillery firing at armor in direct fire mode, and anti-tank guns positioned to ambush. The psychological impact on both sides proved as significant as the tactical results. American tankers learned they could fight and win against Panthers when properly supported and tactically positioned. German panzer crews learned that American armour, despite technical inferiority, posed a genuine threat when aggressively employed in combined arms teams. More critically, American commanders learned that the doctrinal division between tanks and tank destroyers, elegant on paper, failed operationally in fluid combat. Tanks fought what appeared in front of them. Specialized anti-armor vehicles could not always be in position when needed. The inflexibility of assigning exclusive roles to different vehicle types created dangerous gaps in capability. Within weeks, the lessons from Mortain began spreading through American armored units. Tank crews stopped automatically retreating when German armor appeared. They started looking for tactical advantages, terrain that provided flanking opportunities, fog that reduced German range advantages, combined arms support that could suppress German infantry while tanks engaged armor. The doctrine still officially prohibited tank versus tank combat, but combat crews increasingly ignored it. September 1944 brought the Battle of Arracourt, the largest tank engagement American forces would fight until the Bulge. The engagement would prove conclusively that American armor doctrine had fundamentally changed, not because headquarters issued new field manuals, but because tank crews and commanders, learning from Mortain and dozens of smaller engagements, discovered that fighting German armor directly, using proper tactics, won battles. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams commanded the 37th Tank Battalion of the 4th Armored Division, a West Point graduate who led from the turret of his command Sherman, which he named Thunderbolt. Abrams embodied the aggressive spirit that was replacing doctrinal caution. His battalion motto declared simply, "Courage conquers." By September 1944, the 37th Tank Battalion had become one of the most experienced and effective American armored units in Europe. General George Patton's Third Army had broken out from Normandy and raced across France, advancing faster than logistics could sustain. By mid-September, American forces had crossed the Moselle River and established a bridgehead near the town of Arracourt in Lorraine. German High Command recognized the threat. If Patton's armor reached the Rhine and crossed into Germany proper, the industrial heart of the Reich lay exposed. German 5th Panzer Army received orders to counterattack, destroy the American bridgehead, and push Patton's forces back. The German force assembled for this attack included two newly formed panzer brigades, the 111th and 113th, equipped primarily with Panther tanks fresh from German factories. On paper, German advantage appeared overwhelming. The two brigades together fielded approximately 150 tanks against Combat Command A of the 4th Armored Division, which possessed roughly 50 Sherman tanks. The 113th Panzer Brigade alone entered battle with approximately 90 tanks and assault guns in both battalions combined, including 42 Panthers and 40 Panzer Mark IVs. German planners anticipated rapid victory. The Panthers' technical superiority should compensate for any American advantages in logistics or air support. The Germans were fundamentally mistaken. The Battle of Arracourt, fought over 11 days from September 18th to 29th, 1944, became the crucible where American armored doctrine finally broke free from its doctrinal shackles. What happened in those fog-shrouded fields of Lorraine demonstrated conclusively that American tank crews, properly trained and tactically employed, could defeat technically superior German armor through aggressive combined arms warfare. September 19th, 1944. Thick fog blanketed the rolling terrain around Arracourt. German reconnaissance, practically non-existent for the newly formed panzer brigades that lacked proper scouting units, was completely blind. The Panthers and Panzer IVs advanced in column formation through the mist, a tactical error that veteran American tankers would exploit mercilessly. Combat Command A of the 4th Armored Division held positions along key approaches to Arracourt. Captain Kenneth Lamison's C Company, 37th Tank Battalion, occupied defensive positions south of the village. His Sherman crews had received limited supplies of the new M93 HVAP ammunition, high-velocity armor-piercing rounds, with tungsten carbide cores that could penetrate Panther armor at combat ranges. But they had only 6 rounds per tank. Every shot had to count. The fog that blinded German reconnaissance worked perfectly for American defenders. At approximately 8 in the morning, company-sized elements of the 113th Panzer Brigade penetrated American outposts on the east and south faces of Combat Command A's salient. 2 Allied tank destroyer platoons and a medium tank company engaged the German armoured units in a running fight that extended into the vicinity of Combat Command A's headquarters. A battalion of M7 Priest self-propelled howitzers, caught near the headquarters, engaged German armour with close-range direct fire. Then the fog created the conditions American tankers had learned to exploit. Panthers emerged from the mist at extremely close range, sometimes less than 75 meters. At such ranges, the Panthers' superior long-range gunnery advantage meant nothing. The psychological tables turned instantly. German crews, confident in their armor at long range, suddenly faced American guns capable of penetrating at point-blank distance. Poor tactical deployment of German tanks exposed their weaker side armor to American Shermans, which flanked and knocked out 11 Panthers using the fog as cover. The engagement pattern established that morning repeated over the following days. American forces possessed superior intelligence, better understanding of local terrain, and most critically, better tactical coordination. Tank crews worked closely with tank destroyer units, artillery, and infantry in what Field Manual 17-10 had called combined arms, but what Mortain and Arracourt were teaching in practice. When fog lifted on September 21st, Republic P-47 Thunderbolts of the 405th Fighter Group, 84th Fighter Wing of the 19th Tactical Air Command roared overhead. The close relationship between the 4th Armored Division and 19th TAC enabled ground-air coordination that German forces could not match. Tank commanders called in airstrikes against German Panzer concentrations. Fighter bombers strafed supporting infantry and destroyed supply vehicles, isolating German armor from the combined arms support it needed. The statistics from Arracourt tell the story of doctrinal transformation. Over 11 days of battle, Combat Command A destroyed or disabled approximately 86 German tanks and assault guns. American losses stood at 25 Sherman tanks and 7 tank destroyers. The kill ratio heavily favored the Americans despite their technical disadvantage in individual tank performance. More significantly, the 37th Tank Battalion under Abrams lost 14 Shermans while knocking out 55 Panthers and Tigers. In one engagement, Abrams's own crew engaged and destroyed multiple German tanks from his command Sherman Thunderbolt. The feat was possible not because doctrine changed officially, but because combat crews had learned to use terrain, combined arms, support, and aggressive tactics to negate German technical advantages. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The German perspective on Arracourt was confusion and bitter recrimination. The 113th Panzer Brigade, which entered battle with approximately 90 tanks and assault guns, could muster fewer than 20 operational vehicles by September 29th. German after-action reports struggled to explain the defeat. The technical superiority of the Panther was undeniable on paper. How had inexperienced crews in newly produced tanks been defeated so comprehensively? The answers lay in multiple factors. German crew training quality had declined severely by late 1944. The Panzer Brigade crews had minimal training, often arriving at the front with only weeks of instruction. American tank crews in the 4th Armored Division were veterans who had fought across France, understood combined arms warfare, and had learned to read terrain for tactical advantage. Logistics played a critical role. American supply lines, though stretched, delivered fuel, ammunition, and replacement vehicles reliably. German logistics, disrupted by Allied bombing and partisan attacks, struggled to sustain forward units. Panthers that broke down, a common occurrence given their mechanical unreliability, could not be recovered or repaired without spare parts that never arrived. But most fundamentally, American forces had learned to fight German armor directly rather than avoiding it. The doctrinal prohibition against tank versus tank combat had been quietly abandoned by crews who discovered that Shermans, properly employed with combined arms support, could defeat Panthers. The psychological shift mattered as much as tactical improvements. American tankers no longer felt helpless against German armor. They felt capable. German intelligence officers, examining destroyed Panthers, found evidence that disturbed them deeply. Penetrations through the gun mantlet suggested American guns had improved capability. Examination of unexploded rounds recovered near disabled tanks revealed tungsten carbide cores. The Americans had deployed specialized anti-armor ammunition, but more troubling to German planners, The tactical employment patterns showed American forces actively seeking engagement with German armor rather than avoiding it. The Battle of Arracourt marked a watershed. American armored doctrine, officially unchanged, had been transformed in practice. Tank crews no longer automatically called for tank destroyer support when Panthers appeared. They assessed tactical conditions, looked for advantages, and engaged when circumstances favored them. Combined arms coordination meant artillery, air power, tank destroyers, and tanks worked as an integrated team rather than separate specialists performing assigned roles. The lessons from Mortain and Arracourt spread through American armored units in Europe. Tank commanders like Abrams, who demonstrated that aggressive tactics worked, became models. Training emphasized tactical flexibility over doctrinal rigidity. Crews learned to exploit terrain, coordinate with supporting arms, and engage enemy armor when advantageous, rather than reflexively avoiding it. The impact on German forces proved equally significant. Panther crews who had believed their frontal armor made them invulnerable learned otherwise. The knowledge that American tanks now possessed ammunition capable of penetrating at combat ranges fundamentally altered tactical calculations. German crews became more cautious, slower to engage, generally less willing to take tactical risks that had characterized panzer operations earlier in the war. By October 1944, American commanders openly acknowledged what combat crews had been practicing for months. Tanks would fight other tanks. The specialized tank destroyer force, while valuable, could not handle all anti-armor missions. The inflexible doctrinal division between exploitation tanks and anti-tank specialists failed under operational conditions, where fluid combat meant tanks engaged whatever targets appeared. General Omar Bradley, in correspondence with Eisenhower, noted that tank destroyer battalions were increasingly being employed in infantry support roles rather than as dedicated anti-armor reserves. The mobile ambush tactics that doctrine envisioned rarely occurred because German armor seldom concentrated in the massive thrusts that were supposed to trigger tank destroyer deployment. Instead, German tanks appeared in company and battalion strength across wide fronts. American tanks, more numerous and more frequently in contact with German forces, bore the burden of anti-armor fighting, whether doctrine intended it or not. The statistical evidence became overwhelming. When American armor, including both tanks and tank destroyers, engaged German armor, the combined force achieved a kill ratio of 2.75 to 1. For every American armored vehicle lost, German forces lost nearly 3. This ratio held despite German technical advantages in individual tank specifications. The reasons for American success extended beyond improved ammunition or tactical adaptation. Crew survivability proved critically important. When a Sherman was hit and destroyed, an average of 1.1 crewmen became casualties. The remaining crew members escaped through the multiple hatches, including a large belly hatch, side hatches, and turret hatches. German tanks, by contrast, lost crew at 8 times the American rate. Poor escape provisions, internal layouts that made evacuation difficult under fire, and catastrophic ammunition storage designs meant German crews often died with their vehicles. American crews who survived one tank loss returned to combat in replacement vehicles, bringing their experience with them. German crews rarely got that opportunity. The cumulative effect meant American tank units maintained experienced cadres, while German panzer units steadily lost their most capable personnel. Training pipelines could replace bodies, but not combat wisdom. The introduction of improved Sherman variants further narrowed the technical gap. The M4A3E8, nicknamed the Easy 8, featured the 76mm gun and horizontal volute spring suspension that provided superior ride quality and cross-country mobility. The wet ammunition storage system, introduced across Sherman production, placed ammunition in water glycol jacketed bins that dramatically reduced fire probability when penetrated. This single improvement saved thousands of crew lives and eliminated the Ronson lighter reputation that had haunted earlier models. By December 1944, when Germany launched its desperate Ardennes offensive in the Battle of the Bulge, American armored doctrine had completely transformed in practice. The German attack on December 16th employed approximately 1,500 tanks and assault guns in 24 divisions, the largest concentration of German armor since Kursk. Hitler intended to split Allied armies, capture the port of Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. The attack achieved initial surprise and local success. German armor penetrated deep into American lines, but the response demonstrated how thoroughly American combined arms doctrine had evolved. Tank crews no longer retreated automatically when Panthers and Tigers appeared. They engaged aggressively, using terrain and supporting arms to negate German technical advantages. Barthélemy and dozens of other small engagements, American tanks and infantry fought German armor in close coordination. Bazooka teams targeted side and rear armor, while Shermans provided covering fire. Artillery forward observers called time-on-target missions that damaged optics, disabled tracks, and killed exposed crew members even when shells could not penetrate armor. Tank destroyer battalions, equipped with the new M36 Jackson with its 90mm gun, provided dedicated anti-armor firepower that could engage Panthers and Tigers on more equal terms. The critical difference from early war engagements was tactical integration and crew confidence. American tankers no longer felt overmatched. They had learned that German armor could be defeated through proper tactics, even when technical specifications favored the enemy. This psychological transformation mattered as much as any material advantage. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams exemplified the new American approach. During the relief of Bastogne on December 26th, Abrams led his battalion directly toward the encircled town despite strong German opposition. When his column faced uncertain enemy strength, he made the aggressive choice. Climbing into the turret of Thunderbolt 4, his 4th Command tank of the war, Abrams radioed to his men, "We're going into those people now. Let her roll." The 37th Tank Battalion smashed through German defences at Assenois and broke the siege of Bastogne. The action demonstrated what had become standard American armoured doctrine in practice, if not in official manuals. Lead from the front. Engage enemy armour aggressively when tactical conditions favour it. Coordinate with all available supporting arms. Trust in crew training and combined arms integration rather than individual vehicle superiority. By war's end in May 1945, the transformation of American armoured doctrine was complete. Post-war analysis by the Army would acknowledge explicitly what combat crews had been practicing since Mortain. Tanks must be capable of fighting other tanks. The specialized tank destroyer concept, while producing effective vehicles like the M18 Hellcat, which achieved the highest kill-to-loss ratio of any American armoured vehicle, had proven operationally insufficient as the sole anti-armor force. The post-war doctrine, enshrined in training manuals for the emerging Cold War Army, stated bluntly what Mortain and Arracourt had taught: to gain armor, supremacy is one role of the tank. The text continued. Enemy tanks can best be taken out by US tanks, and enemy armor must be destroyed before the main attack is launched. Tank versus tank combat, prohibited by 1942 doctrine, became officially recognized as a primary tank mission. The tank destroyer force was disbanded shortly after the war ended. While 2 tank destroyers would later be developed, the M56 Scorpion and M50 Ontos, neither would be primarily employed against enemy armor. The concept of specialized anti-tank vehicles, separate from the main tank force, had been tried in combat and found wanting. Tanks would handle all missions, including destroying enemy tanks. The human dimension of this doctrinal transformation deserves emphasis. Every burned-out Sherman represented a crew that climbed into a vehicle they knew was technically inferior to what they might face. Early in the war, that knowledge bred fear and hesitation. The doctrine that told them to avoid enemy tanks reinforced feelings of inadequacy. But as crews learned that proper tactics could overcome technical disadvantages, confidence replaced fear. Sergeant Francis Baker's documented experience on November 20th, 1944, illustrated both the improvements and remaining limitations. His Sherman, equipped with a 76mm gun and carrying HVAP rounds, engaged a Panther at approximately 800 yards. Baker's gunner fired at least 7 rounds with multiple hits observed on the Panther's side armor. To Baker's frustration, the rounds bounced off without achieving penetration. The HVAP ammunition, while dramatically better than standard rounds, still had significant limits against sloped armor at oblique angles. But the Panther withdrew from the engagement rather than continuing the fight. Even when American fire did not destroy German tanks, aggressive engagement forced German crews onto the defensive. The psychological advantage shifted. German tankers who had entered the war confident in their superiority now faced opponents who refused to be intimidated. The statistical transformation tells the story with stark clarity. In June 1944, when American tanks landed in Normandy operating under doctrine that told them to avoid enemy armor, German tanks dominated tactical engagements. By May 1945, American armor had achieved a nearly 3-to-1 kill ratio against German tanks and tank destroyers. The Shermans had not suddenly become technically superior. German Panthers and Tigers remained formidable until the last days of the war. What changed was doctrine, training, tactics, and most critically, the aggressive spirit of crews who learned they could win. The lessons from this transformation extend beyond World War II tank warfare. Any military doctrine that assigns exclusive roles to specialized units risks creating dangerous gaps when combat conditions prevent specialization. Flexibility matters more than theoretical elegance. The ability to adapt doctrine based on combat experience proves more valuable than rigid adherence to pre-war planning. American armored forces succeeded in World War II not because they possessed superior equipment. German Panthers and Tigers outmatched Shermans in armor protection and gun performance throughout the war. American success came from superior logistics, more effective combined arms integration, better crew training, and critically, the willingness to abandon doctrine that combat proved wrong. The Sherman versus Panther debate, endless among enthusiasts, misses the fundamental lesson. Wars are not decided by individual weapon comparisons. They are decided by systems. The American system, which included reliable tanks, abundant ammunition, excellent logistics, effective crew training, and flexible tactical doctrine, defeated the German system despite German technical advantages in individual weapons. Lieutenant Colonel Abrams, who went through 7 different tanks during the war but always commanded Shermans, provided the clearest testament to the doctrinal transformation. After the war, Abrams headed the tactics department of the Armor School at Fort Knox, Kentucky. The doctrine he taught emphasized lessons learned in combat. Tanks must be capable of fighting other tanks. Combined arms integration provides advantages no single weapon system can match. Aggressive, well-trained crews in adequate equipment defeat hesitant, poorly trained crews in superior equipment. The M1 Abrams main battle tank, named after General Abrams when he served as Army Chief of Staff, embodies these lessons. The tank's powerful 120mm smoothbore gunfires, sophisticated ammunition types, including depleted uranium penetrators that serve the same role tungsten carbide cores served in World War II. The design prioritizes crew survivability through multiple escape routes and protected ammunition storage. Most fundamentally, the doctrine for employing the M1 assumes tank versus tank combat as a primary mission rather than a specialized task for dedicated vehicles. The transformation from avoiding enemy tanks to seeking engagement with them took less than a year of combat. The shift began with necessity at Mortain, where American forces fought German armor because retreat meant defeat. It continued at Arracourt, where American tankers learned that aggressive tactics could overcome technical inferiority. By the Bulge, the transformation was complete. American armor engaged German armor confidently, using combined arms support and tactical skill to achieve favorable kill ratios. The human cost of this transformation must be acknowledged. Every destroyed Sherman represented crews killed or wounded. The early battles in Normandy, fought under doctrine that created hesitation and fear, cost lives that might have been saved with earlier doctrinal adaptation. But the crews, who learned through experience, who discovered they could fight and win, saved countless lives by teaching others that German armour could be defeated. The morning fog at Mortain, when Lieutenant Colonel Frankland watched Panthers emerge through the mist and made the decision to fight rather than retreat, marked the beginning. The aggressive spirit that decision embodied spread through American armoured forces. Tank commanders like Abrams demonstrated that leading from the front, engaging enemy armour directly, and trusting in combined arms support worked. By war's end, American tankers had stopped avoiding Panzers. They had learned to hunt them. The 50% improvement in kill ratio from early war engagements to late war battles reflected this. Doctrinal transformation. American armour achieved 2.7 5-to-1 kill ratio, not by developing better tanks, but by developing better tactics, better training, and better doctrine. The abandoned doctrine that prohibited tank versus tank combat remained officially in field manuals until after the war. But combat crews had rewritten it through experience earned in burning Shermans and smoking Panthers across the fields of France, Belgium, and Germany. The lesson they learned, paid for in blood and steel, became the foundation of American armoured doctrine for generations. Wars are not won by following peacetime doctrine. They are won by adapting doctrine to combat realities. American tankers in World War II learned this lesson the hard way. They entered combat told to avoid enemy tanks. They ended the war hunting them. The transformation happened not because headquarters issued new orders, but because crews in the field discovered that fighting worked better than fleeing. September 19, 1944, Arracourt. A section of Lamisson's Shermans engaged the 1st Panther, materializing from the fog at 75 meters. The American gunner fired instantly. The HVAP round struck the Panther's gun mantlet at over 1,000 meters per second. The tungsten carbide core punched through the curved cast steel and detonated the ammunition stored beneath the gun breech. The Panther exploded. 2 more Panthers emerged. Both were destroyed within seconds. That engagement, repeated across 1,000 similar fights, rewrote American armoured doctrine, not through policy memoranda or field manual revisions. Through the accumulated wisdom of crews who learned that technical specifications matter less than tactical skill, that numerical advantage counts only when employed aggressively, and that doctrine that prevents victory must be abandoned regardless of what headquarters says. American tankers stopped avoiding Panzers because combat taught them that avoiding enemy armour meant losing battles. They started hunting Panzers because experience proved that aggressive combined arms warfare could overcome technical disadvantages. The 50% improvement in kill ratios measured the transformation from doctrine-bound hesitation to combat-proven aggression. The crews who climbed into Shermans knowing they faced Panthers never forgot the fear, but they also never forgot that fear could be overcome through training, tactics, and trust in the combined arms team. That lesson, more than any weapon specification or production statistic, explains why American armour succeeded in World War II. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.